Hi friends, it's been a while. Thank you for being patient and waiting for me to get back here with you. It's been a little bit of a hectic couple of months, emotionally really hectic and a bit all over the place. So thank you for being so patient and for sticking with me. Especially thank you to all of the friends who have checked in on me in the last couple of months while things have been pretty difficult and, well, challenging, I guess. So I did a little poll on Instagram. If you don't follow me on Instagram, please feel free if you want to. I have a writing page where I post, poems and all of that kind of thing. That's at Meg Chanham, MEGCHANOM. Yeah, so I did a little poll on Instagram to thank people for being so patient and find out, after a bit of a gap between videos, whether people would prefer for me to kind of launch into so far it's like a 4 or 5 part series of shorter videos talking about grief, or whether a bit of a life update and sharing kind of what's been going on and how I've been dealing with it. And it kind of got pretty close in the end, but the life update won out. So thank you to everyone who voted. Big high fives. And people who voted for starting the grief series, never fear, that's coming up like right after this. So that'll be the next video that I start doing. So thanks for being patient. I think I've thanked you all for being patient a couple of times. But I do appreciate it. So thank you. Make sure you get a cuppa of whatever you like, whether it's tea, coffee, water, hot chocolate, oat milk. I don't know. I don't think oat milk is very nice to drink straight. I'm not too sure. Soy milk is pretty delicious. Almond milk is pretty nice too. Anyway, grab a cup of whatever you would like to drink if you want. Grab a snack if you want. I'm not the boss of you. Do whatever you like. But I would like to suggest that you get comfy. Let me know what you're drinking in the comments if you want to. I'm being a bit boring and doing a repeat tea blend flavor, whatever you want to call it, because my very lovely, very dear friend Amy gifted me a box of beautiful French Earl Grey tea. So I'm having one of those. It's not quite the same as the one that I normally drink, but it's very fragrant and it's very delicious. So thank you, Amy. I would also like to thank Amy and Dave for quite possibly one of the most beautiful gifts ever in history. You know, but hi Bean. Hi. Ooh, your claw is caught in my sweater. I don't like that. Hold on. Yeah, be careful please. Thank you. You comfy? Where was I? I never know what I was talking about. Yeah, I'm right here. Hi. Thank you. Thanks very much. It's a really nice cuddle. Right, what was I saying? Oh yes, I was thanking Amy and Dave. So Dave has a really cool job and he knows lots of things about lots of awesome plants and trees, and it's rad. Brian and I, as you do when you're in a committed long-term, intending to be lifelong relationship, we had talked about everything, and one of those things being what we wanted to happen when we died. Brian didn't want like a funeral or a wake or anything like that. He didn't feel right about taking up a little block of land in a cemetery somewhere, so he wanted to be cremated, and that's what happened. And we found this really cool bio urn, and I haven't done it yet because I'm kind of a little bit freaked out about not knowing where to put it, because if I plant it somewhere then it's there for a long time, and what if I move, or blah blah blah. Anyway, so got this cool bio urn where you can put your loved one's ashes in, and they grow into a tree, which is rad and such a cool idea. So anyway, I thought that he would love that, so or at least, you know, think it was a good idea and like it. So that's the plan. I haven't done it yet, as I said, but in sharing this with some close friends at the time and talking about Brian's favorite types of trees, one of his favorite types of trees, like top of the list, is a sugar maple, which may be a little bit cliche considering he's from upstate New York, but I mean, look at them, they're absolutely gorgeous. Dave so kindly and so generously has spent, you know, the last couple of years sourcing a sugar maple for me. He and Amy recently gifted me a baby sugar maple, and it's honestly just the most beautiful, generous gift. So a big shout out and thank you, and love, love, love to Amy and Dave. Thank you for the tea, thank you for the tree, I love you. I also would like to give a little shout out to, actually a big shout out to all of the friends and family members of mine who very generously gave me their time and their efforts to help me with packing and moving. So that is one of the big things that, actually the big thing that's been happening in the last couple of months. It's been a lot to deal with. I hate using the word anniversary because it's not like an anniversary that I would ever want to celebrate, and I wish that I didn't have to remember it. But the date of Brian's death is in early April. It's the 5th of April. So that was hard, of course, and like I really did notice it affecting me in the weeks leading up, you know, not just in the days prior, but through March even was really quite difficult. And I noticed my patience getting thinner, that veil between my emotions on the inside and like how they manifest externally. I found that that veil got really thin in the lead up, and then I kind of had to stop and think about what was going on with myself, and I realized that it was coming up to that time when we experience trauma. For example, the way Brian died, you know, it's not just things like seeing that portrayed in a film or TV that is triggering, or someone talking about it that's triggering. It's also things like the light outside at a particular time of year, at a particular time of day, the weather, what the air feels like, so many things that our senses pick up on that directly relate to what's going on in our bodies. And this is something that I'm still trying to learn more about in terms of reading about it and learning in that way, like learning about it cognitively, as opposed to just experiencing it and learning more about it that way. But trauma really does get stored and carried in the body. And so there are definitely things that come up that take a little bit of time to work through and kind of sit with, which is really important. So through March into April was a really hard time, but at that time I was also realizing that I needed to move out of our home and find somewhere else to live, which is really difficult. So basically the beautiful, like old, not perfect house that we lived in and made a home of, it was really lovely when we moved in there. It was I don't count the first place that we lived together when Brian first officially moved to Australia, because, you know, I was living with someone and it was like a pretty toxic environment and it was pretty uncomfortable. And then so when Brian moved here, we lived together there for, I have to think about this now because I don't want to lie to you and get it wrong. My birthday is October 22nd, and we took over the lease on our first home together on October 29th.
Okay, so I edited this part out, but insert me telling a very long tangential story as usual. In a nutshell, Brian and I had spent about 2 days together. We'd had our first kiss, and then he had to leave for previously organised family, friend and work events. He returned to see me for a couple of weeks in some last minute unplanned time off in the August. He then left to sail a brand new donated ship from Turkey to Egypt to Australia, but he disembarked in Egypt and came home to surprise me for my birthday. I'm sure I will talk about this and his job in greater detail another time.
Yeah, so he was back 2 days before my birthday, I guess, so that's the 20th. So we lived in that house for like 9 days. That was a very long story to tell you that we only lived in that house together for 9 days. Do not burn your tail. Yes, so we lived in that house together for 9 days and then moved to our first home, which was in Cheltenham. It was this really cute little weatherboard old house. Bean did singe her tail. It stinks like burnt hair. Anyway, we lived there for a year and then we decided to move a bit closer to the city to be closer to our friends, closer for band practice, blah, 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 all the good food spots. And we lived in a house in Brunswick with a friend for, again, a year. From there, we moved into our home in Maribyrnong, right by the river, which was such a beautiful spot. We had the loveliest neighbours ever. So if you ever watch this, I don't think you will, but Chris and Margaret and Adrian and Trent and Brody, thanks for being amazing neighbours. I remember when we moved into that house, it just instantly felt like it was our home. And the weird thing is, we actually didn't live there that long together before Brian died. But it does feel like we had, you know, a long time there together because it really did feel like our home. We made it our home so quickly. It had a big backyard that Mahoney was really happy in. The cats loved it. There was a sunroom for them to lay around in. It was just lovely. It was perfect. Essentially, it's gotten to the stage where I realized that, like, burning through our savings in order to continue living the way that we had been living, in terms of living in the same house with the same rent, you know, the same bills. Our bills were not wild or anything, but I had pretty much the same expenses, like the dogs, it's a dog and 2 cats. The girls, all of their expenses are the same, like their food and treats and vet bills and stuff. Petrol, the same, pretty much the same until COVID happened, of course. All of my bills are pretty much the same, actually, with the exception of adding the fact that I had a really hard time taking care of myself for a long time, and so I ordered a lot of takeout. Like, I was not eating well and I was spending too much money on takeaway food. So just like living and surviving was burning through our savings really quickly. So it got to the stage where I realized I was not able to find a suitable housemate and I couldn't keep living there. When I compared how much rent or mortgage one should, as they say, be paying, I was paying almost double that, like in terms of percentage of my wage. So it's just not feasible. And I had to come to terms with that and make that decision, even though I didn't want to. That's why I was moving, essentially. I just couldn't afford to keep living there. And it started becoming really difficult and really scary, and like I feel a little bit sick even thinking about it. Like, I have this little knot in me. Like, just the fact that, you know, there are so many, even though we didn't live there together for that long, there are so many really beautiful memories that I have there that are prompts. Like, there are parts of that house, like the kitchen doorway is a prompt for a really beautiful memory. Cleaning the house is a prompt for beautiful memories. Doing things in the shed, like building stuff together, going out there and thinking about the fun that we would have building stuff together, which is one of our favorite things to do. So all of those prompts, you know, I have this little fear that without those prompts, there will be memories that I'll lose. And on top of that, like, there are things that I just had never moved that were Brian's. There were some things there that were exactly where he had left them, and I did not feel ready to move them So having to move them out of necessity didn't feel great. I didn't feel ready, but it's just something that I had to do. But mainly it's just the fact that it's our home. The girls are really happy there. I was happy there. You know, a lot of our furniture is secondhand, and our home didn't look pretty or beautiful, but it felt warm, and it was something that people used to say to us a lot when they visited our houses, like whichever one it was that we were living in, but this one too, that it just felt like a really cozy, warm, welcoming home. And I've had people who have dog sat for me who have told me that you can feel the love in our home. And that's something that I was not ready to let go of, or to move away from, or to remove myself from that environment. I came to the realization one night that if I wasn't having to move for financial reasons, I probably just would have stayed there. Like I don't even know how long I would have stayed there for. Like I couldn't tell you. I might have stayed there for fucking ever, you know? And that's probably not healthy. So I had this fear of letting go of these things, and a fear of having to rely on only my mind to give me these memories, you know? And then I guess with that, like with moving out and leaving that place behind, there's also the potential implication that I'm moving on, which is such a bullshit term. If anyone ever tells you that you need to move on when you've lost someone, ignore them, like, or correct them if you feel like you can. Just because your life is continuing because it has to, whether you want it to or whether it's simply that you have to, you know, moving forward and continuing with your life, even if you feel stuck, like the earth still keeps turning, the sun will keep coming up and going down and coming up and going down. And even if you're like not getting out of bed, that's still like moving forward, you know, you're existing and you're waking up in the morning. Even if that's the stage that you're at and you're not moving house or starting a new job or donating their clothes or whatever it might be, whether you are or aren't doing those things, there is a difference between moving forward and moving on. We don't move on. We carry our loved ones with us. And that means sometimes carrying the pain as well of losing them with us forward. So, you know, I hate the idea of, and you can't control what other people think. And this is something that I am constantly trying to remind myself of, even though I'm now in my, you know, early mid is 33, mid 30s, I don't know, almost. Even though I'm in my 30s, I still am having to remind myself, like I'm sure many people are, that what other people think of us is A, not in our control, and B, not our fucking problem. So take what I'm about to say with that in mind, please. But I hate the idea of anyone thinking that I am moving on from Brian, because I'm not, and I never will. And that's something that I'm sure I'll talk about in later videos in the future, but you know, that goes for potential relationships as well. Like, I know that I have a huge heart that is super open and full of so much fucking love to give. And I'm someone who likes being in a relationship, but I don't know if I'm ever going to want that again. Maybe, also maybe not, but if I do, the idea that because someone who is widowed might spend time with a new person in a romantic capacity or have another relationship or fall in love with someone else someday, it doesn't mean that their grief, that their pain, that their loss, that their love is erased. You know, you don't move on from losing someone that you love. You carry that with you. And so the idea of moving on because I'm moving out of that home and, you know, putting some of our things into storage and whatever else has been something for me to grapple with a little bit. Something that I keep trying to remind myself of is that home is a feeling. It's not a house or a place. It's, well, I guess it is a place, but it's a place that's inside you. And I know that when I met Brian, I found it in him. I could have followed him absolutely anywhere, and I would have. I 100% would have. You know, he could have told me he wanted to live, God, in fucking Antarctica, and I would have gone with him without question. Actually, the question probably would have been, what about the girls? I don't know if they were living in Antarctica, but that would be the only question really. I would do whatever he needed or wanted to do. And I know that it was the same for him. I remember one day really, really early on, in the first couple of weeks when he came back. Not the first time, not when he came back when we moved in together, but we got this little window of 3 weeks where he was able to come and visit. And I remember we were waiting for our dinner reservation to come up, and we were at a little park in a playground, and we were sitting in this huge swing. It was one of those ones that's like a big round net, and so both of us could fit in. We were laying down in it and swinging, and I remember him telling me that he could feel happy if we were living on the street, as long as he and I and Mahoney, at the time we didn't have the cats, were all together. You know, he said that he would be happy. And that's not to say that living on the street or not having a house to live in means that you can't be happy. I don't mean to say that or imply that at all. Just highlighting what home means. It's not a house. Having a home is not having a house. It's a feeling and a place that you find within yourself. And if it's another person who helps you to find that, then so be it. I think that's something that I talked about in my last video, that since losing Brian, I've really been struggling with finding that place within myself without him, you know, feeling completely lost. And I mean, I still do feel lost, but cultivating that notion and that feeling of home within myself is something that continues to be. I haven't mastered it or anything. I'm still fucking bumbling through it, but that realization, I guess, has helped a little bit. Anyway, so now I'm here. I'm back in my hometown and living with my mum and my grandma, which I was really nervous about, but it's been really nice so far. And they have both been so great with Mahoney, which is really lovely because she adores them both. It's been a little bit tricky because our next door neighbors have got 2 huge dogs. They're bigger than people. I don't see Mahoney as being that big, which is kind of funny, but she's pretty big. She's 35 kilos or, you know, about 70 pounds or whatever. So she's pretty big. The 2 dogs next door are both bigger than her, and they bark a lot. And I mean, they're not nasty or anything like that, they just bark a lot. So anytime we're in the backyard, they start barking, and it very quickly got from them barking and running to the fence and barking at her through the fence to then her going, well, if you're going to bark at the fence, I'm going to bark at the fence. Her reactivity after having an incident with a dog at the dog park where she ran past this dog and they lunged and tried to bite her, and then it turned into a whole big thing, and that was a month after Brian died. So she was already a little bit emotionally off anyway, and then that happened, and ever since then she's been quite reactive, something that we're working on still. But it's been quite difficult to deal with because the 2 dogs next door actually launched themselves into the fence, and the whole fence, it's shredding time. Go on, get it out of your system. Right, so the two dogs next door, they like throw themselves into the fence, and you can see like the whole fence moves, and I'm actually really worried that they're gonna come through the fence. At first, it really fucking stressed me out because I felt like I couldn't let her into the backyard without worrying about them coming through the fence. But I have tried to flip that on its head a little bit and am treating it as a really good opportunity to train her. So I've been spending the last like couple of weeks, one of the things that I've been working on is it's tricky to balance the notion of healing with being a little bit afraid of healing, which kind of sounds funny and maybe a little silly, but I know that people who have been through similar grief experience might know what I'm talking about, but you don't necessarily really want the pain to stop, even though it kind of won't anyway. Maybe it will get a little smaller, that hole in your heart, instead of being like a great chasm that you are constantly falling in and drowning in. It can become a little bit smaller, or maybe at least you learn how to navigate around it, and maybe you slip in a little bit, but maybe one day I won't fall in it so much. But yeah, like navigating the fact that I need to figure out how to balance the idea of healing with being a little bit afraid that healing and trying to mend that hole feels like a loss in itself as well. Because when it hurts as much as it does in the, you know, the immediate aftermath, it's justified by society then. Like it's seen as being okay to be in fucking deep all-consuming pain then, but we're expected to move on from that pretty quickly. And then as you get to a stage where, you know, maybe you don't cry every day, maybe you can get out of bed a little easier than you did initially, maybe you can function fine, maybe you could do that all right from the start, and that's okay if you could. I mean, I know people who just threw themselves into work, and that's a valid coping mechanism. Yeah, balancing the acceptance and the healing with having this small part of me that doesn't want the pain to lessen because the grief is important and it's a connection, you know? It's a connection to that love, and it's an expression of love, you know? So there's that too, that I'm still kind of figuring out and working on. But God, I feel like I fucking cry in every video. I don't actually cry as much as it would seem from these videos. But one of the things, actually there have been a few like little gems that have come from this move. One of them is adjusting my relationship with my mom, which I felt like was in a really good place. I felt as though our boundaries were really appropriate. I felt good about that, and it was good for our relationship. So I was worried about that changing, but that has actually been really good so far as well. Another little gem is the amazing and wonderful people who helped me with moving and packing and everything around that. I'm very lucky. But something, I guess, significant that has made me stop and take stock of the fact that actually that's quite a large step forward. It feels like I have stepped onto like in the labyrinth where they're going through the bog of eternal stench, and you have to step across the rocks, or like, you know, going across a river that doesn't smell horrendous, and, you know, going across stepping stones, like feeling as though I've moved to the next stepping stone. I was driving home to the new home, which is actually my old home. It's the house that I grew up in. I was driving from our home in the west one night, like during the move, and I realized that the feeling of resilience had shifted a little bit. Over the past 2 years, I've been feeling like my resilience, like I fucking know that I'm a resilient person, and it's one of those things that when people are being really sweet and really kind, you know, it's a word they use to describe me, which is really wonderful and lovely. But like we all have, right? Everybody's been through a lot of stuff, right? And we will all continue to go through stuff because that's life, unfortunately. But if there is one thing, like, I'm pretty self-deprecating at times, but if there's one thing that I do know about myself, it's that I'm really resilient and I'm really fucking strong. And over the past 2 years, that's been something that I have resented, because it has felt like, it's felt at times as though when people don't know what to say or what to do, one of the things they do is just tell you how amazing they think you are, which is really generous and really nice. But to constantly be told that you're strong and that you're resilient and that you'll get through while feeling really alone kind of can feel like a slap in the face, or like it's almost like a brush off. Like, you know, if I tell you that you've got this, I don't have to help you get it, you know? And that's not to say that that's people's intentions, because people's intentions almost all of the time, are good and come from a really nice, loving, caring place. And we will talk about things like this more in like the grief series, but that resilience for the past 2 years has felt like a burden, partly because it feels like people knowing that you're resilient means that they don't necessarily come to support or aid or help you. And when I say things like that, I don't mean everyone, because I've had some fucking incredible support and assistance and love in my life. So I don't want people to think that I'm just like sweeping everyone with that brush. I'm absolutely not. But this is how I feel sometimes. And I know from, you know, going to like group grief sessions and being in like widow groups on Facebook and stuff like that, which is, I highly recommend. Even if you switch off notifications, a group like that can be really beneficial to just dip your toe into every now and then, because every shitty thing that happens to us and around us after someone close to us dies, every terrible thing that you go through, every shitty thing that someone says to you, every shitty thing that someone does, all of that stuff, all of the bad experiences that make the worst time even worse, I promise you, you are not the only person who's dealing with that or who has dealt with that. It's really easy to feel alone and like isolated and slighted and destroyed by all of those things. I promise you, there are other people dealing with that too, and also feeling destroyed by that stuff. So dipping your toes into those groups can be really helpful if you're interested, not just for widows, but, you know, for grief specific to your situation if you have one, and like other mental health stuff as well, if you like. I'm finding that, and it's not the same thing, but I am finding that there can be quite an overlap between misunderstandings, like societal misunderstandings around grief and mental illness. There's an overlap there with a lot of stuff. But I have spent the last couple of years feeling as though my resilience is a burden because of that, but also because I haven't wanted to be here, like, yeah, quite simply. And like a little bit of a warning here, I'm not going to go into details, but like I woke up every day wishing that I hadn't woken up for a really long time. I say a really long time, but like there are people like Brian who, you know, been dealing with it for decades. And if you are someone who also falls into that category, I'm really sorry. And thank you for still being here, if that's you. But yeah, that resilience and that like fortitude to keep living every day. Sometimes I hated it because I didn't want to, you know. I did stuff because I had to. I existed. I continued existing because I felt like I had to. know that I get really flushed when I am emotional and cry a little bit, so like my face is hot. And I'm not wearing any, like, I'm wearing mascara and a little bit of eyeshadow, but I'm not wearing any like foundation or anything or any other makeup aside from like on my lashes. So like if I'm going red, it's definitely showing on the camera. Anyway, I was driving home and I realized that it had shifted from that resilience feeling like a burden to feeling like a gift that got me through that really difficult task and moment and step of moving out of that home. Just had mascara tears all over my face. I don't know if I'll edit that in or out, but because I feel like I want to share, you know, all of the real stuff with you, but it also feels like really weird and narcissistic to like leave in the part where I'm fucking crying, especially when the way that I cry now is really different than it was before. Even when I've like bawled my eyes out, it was different, so different. Like I can feel that when I cry now, it's my entire body and not just like my muscles, but like it comes from this place inside me, like in my solar plexus, that is so deep, like you can feel it breaking open, and that's where it comes from. And it's like I can't control my face when I'm crying now. You can feel that your face is like distorting in pain. My face didn't used to look like that when I cried, and I can feel it. Every cell in your body feels like it's just contracting and pushing and breaking open with this pain, and it comes out of your face and ruins your mascara. But anyway, I don't know if that's going to be in or not, because I do want to share the reality of that with you. But yeah, it feels like strangely narcissistic to be like, here's me crying. That's how I feel when I'm thinking about myself doing it. That's not how I view other people who share something like that. For some reason, you know, our brains do that, where it's like the rules for yourself are different than they are for other people, and, you know, harder on yourself, meaner to yourself, working on it. The other thing that I want to update you on is, and it kind of links back into the last video as well, about finding home and trying to come back to treating my body better. I have started training a little bit. I think I mentioned in the last video that I was like doing a bit of yoga and doing like yoga with Adrian videos. I've been like terribly inconsistent with that. So inconsistent. So I'm sorry if I'm letting you down a little bit there, because I know I did talk it up, and I do really like it. It does make me feel good, but yeah, I've been very inconsistent with it, and I know that comes from, you know, a mixture of being out of the habit, out of the routine, and also like mental health struggles. So it's a little bit of everything. But a friend of mine who is a Muay Thai fighter has opened his own gym, or a few months ago he opened it. And yeah, he like shared something on Instagram, and I was very excited for him and like congratulated him, and he was like, you should come down. So anyway, I was like, yeah, I will. And then didn't for ages, because hey, you know, sometimes it feels really easy to just not fucking take care of ourselves. Go figure. So I was in this crummy place of not taking very good care of myself, and maybe it was in like March, I was like, you know what, I just gotta go. I just have to actually go. So from the last house, depending on traffic, it should have been like a 25-minute drive, but it was longer in traffic. So maybe like half an hour, 40 minutes, which to me is fine. And yeah, my friend is a really great trainer, really positive and encouraging, and great at holding pads and knows his stuff. Like, he's very skilled and talented. So yeah, it was great. And I was really enjoying punching and kicking stuff again. So that was nice. My body feels good when it's working hard and moving, and you know, it helps your brain too. Like, I realized that I was getting a little bit of those endorphins back that kind of last a couple of days after you work really hard. So that felt good. It was nice to have that noticeable physical and mental reward, I guess. But then moving back to Mornington, that becomes a little bit more of a drive. And to do that, I mean, we were only training together 2 days a week, which is, you know, not much, but it was good. It was working for me. Now living in Mornington, I kind of didn't really have the intention of continuing. I was like, oh, maybe I'll go up once a week. I didn't really make a conscious decision about it initially. I kind of just like kept going, but I'm glad that I've kept going because I've thought about it, and you know, it's a long way to drive, and I'm actually getting up at like 5:30 in the morning to get there, but it's a great way to start the day. It makes me feel good. It's good for me. And the thing is, yes, there are places closer to me that I could train, and at some point maybe I probably will, but also I've started doing something for myself that's really beneficial, and I don't want to give myself a window of opportunity to stop doing that, because I feel like if I stop going, I will just stop going. I probably won't. Like, I don't like going to new gyms. It freaks me out a little bit. It makes me really anxious and self-conscious, and that kind of stops me from taking the first step. And I don't want to put myself in that position. Like, I'm doing something good for myself finally, and I don't want to stop doing that. I don't want to lose that, and I don't want to give myself the chance to just stop altogether. So I will keep going. The drive isn't that bad. Traffic kind of sucks, but it's worth it. I think the feeling that I get when I'm training and the feeling afterwards, I think that that's worth it. And taking care of my body and my mind in this way is worth it. So I feel good about committing to something for myself. I'm also going to be starting coaching there a little bit soon too, which is really nice. Super flattering, because I feel like a totally uncoordinated, mediocre person in terms of where my skill level is at, because I went, 4 years. I think I hit pads once, maybe twice. It's interesting trying to be kind to myself in terms of where my skills are at. So yeah, really flattering, and I feel quite privileged to be asked to come and help out and be on board coaching there. So yeah, also if anyone is in the area, I'll end up sharing something on my Instagram, but welcome to come down. Definitely check it out. Sam's a great coach. I think that about covers the life update. I have a couple more months left of my time off from my full-time job with Animals Australia, so that's kind of racing along pretty quickly. I've been writing. I'm working on, actually, this is another really nice thing, and I won't give too many details because there's only kind of a little bit about it that's like out there on social media or whatever. Not that it's a huge thing, but one of Brian's oldest close friends has written, I guess you could call it a concept album. I don't know if that's what he's calling it, but he's asked me to write and record lyrics and vocals for one of the songs, which is such a huge honor. I feel really nervous about it because I actually haven't written a melody since high school. And I think even then it was compose a piece of music using the ice cream chord progression or something like that. And even being in Judas Wolf, you're not writing a melody when you're singing in a hardcore band. There's rhythm, but there's not really melody. Maybe a little, there's pitch, I guess. Yeah, so I'm nervous about it, but so honored, and I really want to do a good job. So I'm working on that. I've been writing bits of poetry. I've been writing lyrics as well, because there are some things that I write that definitely feel like songs rather than poems. The vibe can be very different. Just trying to, I guess, nurture myself in that creative way, as well as in a physical and a mental way with training. So yeah, I am trying to take care of myself, whereas for the past probably 2 years, I've kind of just been surviving and trying not to drown. So there's been that little shift. That's my little update. Long update. Thank you for listening. If you want to share anything back with me, please do. I'd love to hear from you always. Thanks again to everyone who helped me with moving. I know that I have thanked you all individually and personally, but here's a big public thank you because you're amazing and I'm really grateful to have you in my life. And also like people who offered to help but weren't actually able to when it came to it for whatever reason, thanks for offering as well. So special and lovely. Ooh, my friends in Outright are recording a new album right now, so keep your eyes peeled for that because it will no doubt be sick. And don't forget that vulnerability is powerful. Be kind, be courageous, be kind to yourself, and hopefully I will see you next time when we start talking about grief. All right, I love you. I'll see you next time.